Dune, directed by Denis Villeneuve, who is currently my favorite director and has always been my favorite director since the release of Enemy back in 2013. And since then, pretty much everything he has directed I have either loved or just really enjoyed in general. And in my personal opinion, Denis Villeneuve just doesn't miss, and he hasn't missed with any of his films. But I am biased because he is my favorite director, so yeah, that's just how I feel. But Dune stars Timothée Chalamet, Zendaya, Oscar Isaac, Rebecca Ferguson, Jason Momoa, David Bautista, Josh Brolin, and a whole bunch of other names that I'm sure that you guys are familiar with. So I'm going to keep this log line pretty simple because Dune can be a very complex story. But Dune follows Paul Atreides, a brilliant and gifted young man who was born into a great destiny beyond his understanding. And now he must travel to the most dangerous planet in his universe to ensure that the future of his family and his people survive. And yes, for anyone who knows the story of Dune, you know that that log line is tremendously simplified, but I just want to keep it simple because if you know the story of Dune, you know it, and if you don't, this movie will sort of fill in the blanks. But if you really want to know the story of Dune, of course, you need to go back and watch the David Lynch version, or most of all, just read the books. So as for my initial reaction, which I forgot to film by the way, my apologies, but my initial reactions coming out of Dune, I have to say that Denis Villeneuve's Dune is pretty much incredible. And just for the record, I have to state that I have seen David Lynch's version and I have read the first book of Frank Herbert's Dune series. And after seeing this film, I have to say that Denis Villeneuve's perspective on the film is probably my new preferred way of experiencing the Dune story. There were just so many aspects of the film that I was pleased with that I'm really not quite sure where to start. I mean, like, first of all, the character portrayals here were amazing. Timothée Chalamet as Paul Atreides was a perfect casting choice after witnessing his performance in part 1. He truly captures Paul's growth, his uncertainty, and the courage of the character. I mean, I was very convinced and impressed with what he was able to do in this film as Paul Atreides. And holy shit, Stellan Skarsgård as the Baron was terrifying. In David Lynch's version, this character just wasn't really scary at all, but rather more goofy. But I think that Denis' version is tremendously better. And he truly stands out as an evil force and someone that many people fear, and you clearly understand why because of his actions and basically, you know, Stellan's performance that make it very loud and just clear and very demanding of a role. But I will say, by the way, I understand that David Lynch's version did receive praise from Frank Herbert, and I think he did approve that version was a very clear version of his story visually. So I don't want to get too crazy because the writer himself has given the original film his blessing. But for me personally, I think that this retelling of the story was perfect.
I get asked a specific question a lot of times. If the settings, the scenes that I saw in David's film match my original imagination, the things that I projected in my imagination, and I must tell you that some of them do precisely. Some of them don't, and some of them are better, which is what you would expect of artists such as David and Tony Masters. And I'm delighted with that. I mean, why not take it and improve on it visually? As far as I'm concerned, the film is a visual feast.
I mean, there's honestly just so many character portrayals that I could get into with this film. I could probably go down the list, but I'm just only going to do a couple more. Like, for example, Oscar Isaac's portrayal of Leto Atreides, Paul's father. I mean, you really feel his leadership on the screen. Like, it hits a lot harder for me personally than it did in the film. From the previous film, David Lynch's version, and the books, honestly, I mean, I felt you felt this guy could command his whole community, his whole society, and you felt the influence and leadership that he had over this society. Like, they truly really respected him. So when, I don't want to give away any spoilers for anybody who hasn't read the books, but when whatever happens, you feel it. You feel the thing that truly impacts the story the most. And I'll just leave it at that because I don't want to give away too much. And also, Rebecca Ferguson's Lady Jessica was fucking awesome as well. I mean, when it was time for her to showcase her Bene Gesserit side, I was also very convinced that this religion that she's attached to and how much it was embedded in her character's DNA felt real. I mean, you just felt like this was something that she had truly dedicated her life to, and why being a mother to Paul is, you know, such a difficult responsibility responsibility for her because of this vow that she has made to this religious organization. And like I've already said, there's a lot more that I could truly say about the character portrayals here, but just know that overall, I would say the major character portrayals were fucking awesome. They all fit perfectly in my opinion. Some more than others, but overall across the board, they all pretty much fit their character roles. Also, I really want to talk about the set pieces here and just the atmosphere of Denis' Dune and you know, his perspective and his vision behind the camera with the help of Greg Fraser, just kind of how they were able to bring this whole thing to life. I mean, you want to talk about immersive and, you know, just really being able to bring a fictional place to life on screen and convince an audience of people that this place is real. I mean, I was convinced that Arrakis was a real place while watching this film. I mean, with a real history and a real society of people that have been there for ages, aka the Fremen, who are, you know, the natives of Arrakis. I mean, just being able to accurately express the scale of Arrakis and then, you know, have DJ Hans Zimmer in the background on the ones and twos just made the whole ambiance feel alive. Honestly, there were just so many moments where I felt chills while watching this movie because it was just kind of crazy to see a lot of these moments being readapted once again and being retold on the big screen. I mean, except this time it just felt like this was the way that the movie was always meant to be experienced. The story was always meant to be experienced. Because I already knew that this film was going to be great and I had very little doubt that it would be anything less, honestly. I mean, we're talking about my favorite director, Denis Villeneuve, accompanied by one of the best film score composers working today, Hans Zimmer, although my personal favorite is probably Ludwig Göransson. And we also have the cinematography by Greg Fraser. And you know, Greg Fraser is known for large-scale projects like these because he did Rogue One, Zero Dark 30, Lion, and he also is doing the cinematography for the Batman releasing next year. But now he's no Roger Deakins, but the guy is very good at what he does. Plus, if anything, Dune proves that Denis doesn't really need, you know, the great Roger Deakins behind the camera with him to get his vision across for these much larger scale experiences because, you know, those guys are kind of a match made in heaven when it comes to making just great films and amazing movies. But with all of that said, I'm giving Dune a 9.5 out of 10. Visually and viscerally, it's hands down the most immersive experience I've had in cinema all year. My only complaints would be that very rarely, in some moments, I felt some scenes lingered just a little too long. But this was a very rare occurrence for me, but because of that, that's why I'm giving it a 9.5 out of 10 instead of a 10 out of 10. That's just how I'm feeling about the film, but I still loved it because that's still a very high score. Yeah, man, my favorite director is once again showing his ass with this amazing movie. This movie is great. But anyway, Dune releases next Friday, October 22nd in theaters and on HBO Max, but I would highly recommend that you go see this in IMAX if you want the one true Dune experience. Honestly, that's the best way to experience this movie first. But there you have it, and if you enjoyed the content, you know what to do. Thank you for watching.